All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Monday, November 17th of 2025. Looking ahead here, we have a NFL showdown between the Cowboys and the Raiders. We have a 7-game NBA main slate and a 6-game NHL main slate. So should be a fun day of DFS. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS-related questions. Get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual support channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team. Just can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, and then we do this show on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, so you can tune in any one of those days to get your questions answered. All right. Let's get SaberSim pulled up on the screen. Quick note, we will not have office hours tomorrow on Tuesday, but office hours will be back for the rest of the week on Wednesday through Saturday. So show today, no show tomorrow, back Wednesday. All right, we got SaberSim pulled up. We got this NFL showdown slate pulled up as like our starting point, and then we will just start to answer some questions and then kind of see where we go from there. So I got some questions queued up from the Discord. First question today. I know late swap is talked about to death, but in the NBA, should you just mindlessly late swap before every start time and trust the Sims? Or if there's no news, just keep writing what you got. I've been just late swapping mindlessly and haven't noticed great results. Wondering if there's a method to the madness. Okay, good question. So I'll tell you guys what I do here. I know people do different things, and you kind of got to weigh. I think you have to weigh like life EV versus like how much EV you think you're getting in a certain scenario. So what I do is I will run my build, right? I'll run my build, submit my lineups, and then I pull up the Discord, and then I just have this here, right? And then I'm just watching for Sims, right? When Sims run, I'm basically trying to decide, hey, do I think this news is worth swapping for or not? And maybe it's like better to use something like this, right? Like lineups getting confirmed and lineups being expected, when it says no differences from expected, I won't swap personally, right? Now, where I will swap is like if I see something like this, Atlanta Phoenix, Gillespie comes down about 30 points. Ryan Dunn comes up about 2. That feels like valuable, right? That's like I would call it like a significant projection change that I feel is worth swapping for. But like super minor ones, I personally don't swap. Like I wouldn't have swapped or even rebuilt for like this Nikhil Alexander-Walker one where, he moves like less than a point. Basically every player in this sim moved less than a point. Kobe White moving 1 point. I don't know how valuable that was. He's probably like a high salary, low value here coming back from injury, I'd imagine. Drew Holiday getting ruled out, right? I would definitely swap for that. So what I'm doing is I am watching the Discord. If there is nothing I feel that is worth swapping for, I am personally sticking with what I had prior. Reasons for and against doing that. Some users like to swap at every window because you get to take advantage of the new unlocked ownership projections on DraftKings. Okay. If we had somebody projected for 35 and they came in at 30%, right? There is like some edge in getting the updated ownership, taking in the new updated ownership and then re-simming with the updated ownership, right? That's a reason for, right? I don't know how much edge you're sacrificing by not doing that. To me, it feels minor, but some users are trying to like squeeze out like every single edge that they can get. So like, I totally understand the want to do that. For me, it's more like a life EV thing. I feel like the time that I would spend at every single lock swapping is like not worth the trade-off for like my day-to-day stuff. So you kind of got to figure out what works for you. But overall, I think it's totally okay to stick with what you got. If not much has changed, but if you want to swap it every window, then you're not hurting yourself by doing that. All right, next question. Hey, Andrew. Unfortunately, haven't been able to tune into office hours for a good while now. So this has been talked about. I apologize. In situations where I decide to use min uniques for the entirety of a slate over the diversifier, does it make sense to still have different lineup groups, or should I condense instead into one group? Okay, good question. So it's going to depend whether or not you care whether you have a certain number of uniques between contests, right? So like if you're using uniques, and you say you have it set to 3, right? So, okay, I have 220 maxes in this example. The 20 lineups in group 1 are going to have 3 uniques different from every other lineup in the 20. And then the same thing for group 2, but there's nothing controlling the uniques between the groups, right? Group 1 could have lineups that are 1 min unique between group 2. Now, I don't know if you care about that or not, right? If you do care about that, that would be a reason to run one group and run 40 lineups as opposed to running 2 separate groups. If you're okay with that, if you're like, you know what, I just want the lineups within the contest to be different, to be, more spread out across the standings. I don't care as much about between groups, right? Like between contests. Then, that would be a reason for having 2 separate groups, right? So got to kind of figure out which one works best for you. This kind of leads into like another thing that we've talked about, or our questions I've gotten that I think is like kind of along these same lines. With regard to like the default templates, right? They're all for a different type of user. And there isn't like a wrong or right one to use, or there's not like a best one and like a worst one, right? So people asking like, hey, what's the best template to use, or why would you use this one instead of that one, or et cetera, right? Like people play DFS different. It's like I don't know. People shoot different, right? LeBron James has a different shooting form than Steph Curry, and Steph Curry has a different shooting form than Nikola Jokic, right? It doesn't mean any of them are wrong. They're just approaching the same problem differently, right? These default templates, what we're trying to do is trying to capture the most common ways that people like to build their DFS lineups, and then giving you the ability to customize it if needed, right? They all contest in one group. Say you're playing, a 150 and a 20, right? It'll give you 150 lineups total, and then you will just basically duplicate 20 into the 20 max from the 150. Direct fill would give you 170 lineups in that example, giving you a unique lineup for each entry in one group. Better for a lot of min-max exposures. There are some players who are very hands-on, like to use a lot of exposures. And then one group per contest gives you a different group for each contest, allowing you to analyze the exposures on a group-by-group basis, and then send exposures to each group. Probably better for somebody only sending a couple exposures rather than a lot, right? There's not a wrong or right one. There's not a best one or a worse one. Just kind of whatever works with your process. So kind of a tangent, but I feel like it was kind of relevant to the original question here. We actually have 2 questions about defense exposure here. So I'll read both. Okay, starting again. Are we looking to go very low, almost 0 defense exposure tonight? I know showdown slates have been defense special team winners in almost all lineups, but tonight feels okay to have very low exposure. And then another question, over 150 lineups, what type of DST exposure do you expect to play tonight? All right, so I think it's probably best here to just run a build here and kind of talk about this. So I think anytime you're like looking for, an answer to a question, right? I think you can run a build, and I think you can get feedback from a SaberSim about what it thinks you should do, right? So I'm just going to run a stock build here. without any inputs and try and get some ideas. All right, our build is finishing. And I'm just using a unique one for now. So I'm going to come in here. Our build runs. I'm looking at 1,500. I built 1,500 lineups. I'm looking at the top 150 sorted by Saber score. And then I come in here and now I can kind of analyze this, right? And I'm kind of looking at a couple of different things. I'm looking at the defense ownership. So I'm just going to go to flex. Like most people are probably asking this question with regard to flex. I'm looking at the ownership of the defenses, the exposures, and then I think you can also use the pool exposure for reference as well, right? I'm going to bring this over. So number one is, where are the defenses, right? Okay, I scroll down here. I see Cowboys. So Cowboys projected for about 15.9% ownership. So what that means is that about 16% of lineups in your contest are going to roster the Cowboys. So people are playing them. People are playing the Raiders at about 10 to 11%. So overall, defense exposure somewhere between 25 and 30% is what we expect lineups to have. Now, SaberSim thinks that in your top 150, that playing the Cowboys a little over the field is viable, and playing the Raiders about equal to ownership is the right approach here. So like we have like neutral leverage on the Raiders. We're a little higher exposed to the Cowboys. Kind of makes sense with the Cowboys being the favorite here. Raiders lower team total. Then you have like another point of reference, which is the pool, right? So like the exposures describe our top 150 or whatever numbers in this lineups box. But then the pool describes all 1,500 lineups. So it gives you like a bigger sample kind of reference point. And saying, okay, well, we know what the builder thinks in our top lineups, but what about all of our lineups in total, right? Well, here, the Cowboys come down a little bit closer to their ownership, and Raiders actually have like a little bit of small positive leverage here. I wouldn't consider either of these numbers very like actionable, I guess. Raiders being 2% higher in the pool doesn't mean a lot to me. The fact that we're neutral in the pool, but a little leverage doesn't feel bad. It's not a lot of leverage. 5% leverage isn't very much here, right? Considering they're 15% owned. So it's not 1.5x. It's not double, right? So small stand, but not a huge one. So overall, I think it's fine to roster defenses tonight. I would not feel any particular way about rostering them, at the rates that SaberSim is giving me. I'm not trying to get a certain amount or get under the field. I don't have opinions. You can have opinions, and you can work them in with min and max exposures if you want. But I think just running a build and getting SaberSim's opinion before kind of doing maybe your final build, right? It's like your base build, and then you open up a new one, and then you make all your adjustments that you want and kind of run it. Just gives you like some ideas kind of out of the gate to compare up against your takes for the slate. So that's what I would be doing there with regard to the defense questions. All right, next question. Is there a column on SaberSim that more or less tells you what the optimal rate a player might appear in the winning lineup? Is that similar to the pool or no? Okay, good question. So kind of already talking about it a little bit. I think pool exposure is going to be your closest reference point to a number close to what you're describing. And the reason for that, right? Why is that? Well, it's because every time we're building lineups on Sim Diversity 10 here, we're taking a single sim from the slate, playing it out, building effectively the optimal lineup from that sim, right? Highest scoring lineup under the salary cap. So your pool is effectively kind of your optimal rate for players. And then the exposures are the optimal rates for what SaberSim thinks are the best lineups to play out of your entire pool, right? So lineups get built, lineups go into the pool, and then lineups get graded. So it's taking all of your optimal lineups and then figuring out which ones it thinks are the best, right? So when you look at only 150 out of 1,500 here, right, in the example, I just ran 1,500 for time's sake, you're only looking at 10% of your lineups, right? So you're leaving out the other 90%. Well, the pool exposure gives you that other 90% to kind of weigh against your current exposures, weigh against some of your takes, and help you decide which direction you actually want to end up going here. So you could definitely use that as a marker here if you want to. I think it's totally okay to, but that would be probably what you'd be looking for. All right. Caught up with questions right now. I think we're going to keep rolling. We've already kind of started like a slate demo for this showdown slate here, right? Already building lineups, already starting to like analyze stuff. We've only analyzed like a small bit of this, right? With analyzing the defenses, but I think we can go like a little bit further here. So I'm going to go back to my captains. I'm going to analyze these. It looks like we really like Brock Bowers, about 2x the field. I'm okay with that. Leverage is like under 20%. It's not that drastic, right? Like leverage equals ownership. So we're double here. Double on Javonte Williams as 2. And then smaller leverages here, right? And then taking basically a stand against Dak Prescott, right? Where we are half the field on him, right? We have the same leverage as ownership, but in the negative direction here. So some positive leverages, some negative leverages. I think all that's expected. Little low on CD Lamb too. Again, you can adjust these if you see fit. Minimax exposures are great for doing that. Go over to the flex. Kind of similar numbers, right? I'd say like plus or minus 20%, positive 18, negative 15 are like the biggest ones. And pretty consistent with what we were seeing on the other side. So here, right, we're taking, Bowers, Genty, Tucker, and then we're getting like a lot of Geno in the flex. That makes sense. And then we're taking a stand against Dak in the captain. We're playing his running back in the captain. And then we're taking a stand against Dak as well in the flex. So we really don't like Dak Prescott. I would assume that we're hoping that the Cowboys run touchdowns and the Raiders pass touchdowns. That's kind of the game script that I'm seeing as like a trend here. But again, feel free to customize and tweak this as much as you need to. But that'd basically be what I would be looking out for the showdown tonight. And that is a quick walkthrough. All right. Looking here, looks like we are all caught up with questions, and we also knocked out a slate demo. So I think we're going to get out of here. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern for our next show. So until then, everybody, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.